You may think this video is about bashing these rolling kitchen islands for DJ booths. It's not really what it's about. What I want to talk about before I get into any of that stuff is some of the DJ related trends we've seen come and go over the last, let's say, 15 years. What stuck and what stayed? One of the first things I can remember, going back about 15 years ago when I started the YouTube channel, and it blew my mind when I saw it, were the cluster lasers. Do you remember those? I pulled these pictures off of Amazon. They were usually green and red dots. Sometimes they had gobos attached to them. It was like science fiction. I'd never seen anything like that. It was absolutely beautiful stuff. You could shine it on the ceiling, you could shine it behind you, or I guess you could spray an audience with it. Add fog, and wow, this was incredible. Of course, now you can buy these for a little bit of nothing and put them in your front yard and shine them on your house for Christmas. My mother's been doing it for years. And it's the same thing with some of these moonflowers and laser effects that were really hot for a while. Do you remember those? The reason that those worked so well and they were so neat, in my opinion, was because we could use atmosphere at our events, fog, haze, things like that, to enhance the experience. And remember, there was a time in my career when you could smoke indoors at a wedding reception at any given banquet hall you went to. The only place you weren't smoking was if you did a school job. Nobody was smoking in the building there. So there was some atmosphere in the air for the light to reflect off of, so these aerial effects had punch. But once you couldn't really use atmosphere anymore, reasonably use atmosphere anymore, yeah, sure, you can get a fire marshal and that, nobody goes through that anymore. There are all kinds of perceived issues that people have with breathing and things of that nature with atmosphere, so nobody really wants it. Those type of effects aren't as valid anymore. So, those are kind of trendy effects. Those are the kind of things I'm talking about. On the other hand, at about the same time, I started hearing the buzzword uplighting. The first time I heard it was in 2008. Jay Branning was talking about it. And he was talking about just reflecting light off a wall, just blowing it up a wall. I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. It's something we couldn't do before with halogens safely because we were always afraid a toddler would touch it, or maybe it would go up against a curtain and catch a linen on fire or something. But with LED, yeah, you could do this safely. So that was a trend. A lot of people were buying some kind of LED pars to do uplighting around a room. Was that a trend, or did that stick? It stuck. That's something that people still ask for, still want to pay for. I've incorporated it into my light show. So I don't use any kind of aerial effects or anything like that anymore. I'm using all pars on the floor in an uplighting style, chasing in some kind of a random pattern, and that's how my stuff works. Everything works a little different, and it's just kind of a matter of how you control the lights, I guess. But neither here nor there. That's not a trend. That's something that stuck. It's part of what we do now. How about gobo projectors? There was a time when everybody wanted a gobo projector. Here's one that I did right behind my house. Probably, 8 or 9 years ago. They're still out there. People still use them. But they're not this add-on that everyone wants and is willing to pay for. Now, when you do gobo, remember, you've got to go through a company like Roscoe. And you have to have the gobo custom made. And there's glass gobos and steel gobos and different monogram styles that you can have and all of these things. It costs money to do this. It takes time to do this. How much is the client willing to pay for the service? It's just not something that I ever sold at every event. I sold it a couple of times, and that was it. Was the investment worth my while? No. Do some people do very well with gobo projectors? Yeah, they do. But a lot of people moved on to something else, like data projectors. That was interesting that you could do like a moving gobo kind of thing. That was a trend for a while, remember that? But you could, if you were a graphic designer, make a monogram and put it in a type of file where you could project it with your data projector. and there was something about the black had to be really good or something, so you didn't see the lines, whatever. But just data projectors in general were a thing because people wanted to do slideshows. And they paid up for it for a while. I bought a data projector. I think I paid $1,200 for it. Did I get my money back? Yeah, I did, but I didn't make a lot on it, and it took a long time. Plus, there was the screen that I had to haul around, and it was just a lot of hassle for not a lot of money because this stuff started going down in price. The data projector started going down in price. So people weren't willing to pay as much for the service, even though you were the one who had to set everything up and figure out how you were going to wire their computer or whatever up to the data projector to project whatever they wanted, be it a video or a slideshow or whatever. It was a lot of work for not a lot of money. So in my opinion, that was a trend that for most of us is no longer valid. I know some of you who do corporate stuff and production stuff are still doing well with this type of thing. But those of us who are just wedding DJs, it's probably not worth my while or our while. Whenever somebody asks for something like this, I tell them that I don't offer it anymore and that they're probably better off just going with whatever the hall's option is. I don't know what the hall's charging. I don't want to get into a bidding war with them. I'll let them deal with that headache. I want to focus on the DJing aspect of what I do. Scrims. Remember those? Everything was scrim for a while. I went for it. It was a cool solution, especially when we were using 6-foot banquet tables and tripods, because there were cables everywhere. This was a real easy way to clean things up. Now you could either do black or white, and when you did white, what was neat was you could backlight this stuff with LEDs and make your system glow. Now I don't use scrim much anymore, and it's not because I don't like it, it's just because I don't need it. I've moved on to other things, like column array speakers. I don't have to scrim that because they're not going on a tripod, so I don't have to clean anything up there. My table is now an ADJ Pro Event Table 2. I've got a silver one, I've got a black one. They do not require scrim. You could put some kind of lycra material on them if you want to, but it's not necessary because that truss look I think is a decent look. I personally like it, so I'm not doing it. That doesn't say that I never use scrim though, because I do sometimes. I put together a system that I took out to a casino a while back, and I had my club rack on an X stand. I scrimmed the X stand, and it made all the difference in the world. It made it look really nice. So, yeah, I'm not scrimming my whole setup anymore, but once in a while, there's something that scrim helps with aesthetically, like the X stand. It's a really good idea. But no, it's not as big as it used to be. That brings us on to the DJ tables. Again, I'm using the Pro Event Table 2. It works really well for me. Is it trendy? Yeah, kind of. But I'll tell you something. It solved problems for me that I didn't know I had. I'll give you an example. I'm almost 6 feet tall. And after every event, I was experiencing leg and lower back pain. And part of me thought, well, you know, you're disabled now. You probably shouldn't stand that long. So you get different shoes, you get insoles, you do all these things. It turns out the reason that I was in so much pain was because I was leaning over a 6-foot banquet table all the time. And that was causing stress. I think the table height is about 28 inches or something like that on a standard, banquet table that you'd sit out and have dinner. But the Pro Event table puts me at about 36 inches at the bottom of the table, plus my stuff on top of it. I'm no longer bending over. In fact, my laptop is in front of me, so no problem. At 4 feet by 2 feet, it's got the depth that I need, which is 24 inches for any mixing boards or anything I'm running. And it fits in a smaller space than the 6-foot banquet would. So that's the cool thing about the table. And I think that these, I don't know, what do we want to call them? Let's call them DJ cabinets, because that's kind of what they are. It's a DJ booth, but it kind of looks like a kitchen island almost, with coasters on it and a TV inside of it. Now, I'm sure there are different materials these are made out of. Some are probably made of aluminum, framing, some are made of wood. They're made of a lot of different things. And I'm sure they solve some problems. They have to. Otherwise people wouldn't use them. The TV in front's a neat idea. You can put a monogram on there. We were talking about the Goo Projectors earlier. Well, if you have this monogram in front of your booth, you've kind of taken care of that at one level. You can have all your stuff in there. You don't have to take anything apart or break it down at the end of the night. You just cover up this booth and roll it out into your van that can accommodate it. So it has advantages. But the weight of these things has to be pretty substantial, I would think. And they have to be. And when we're talking about equipment these days, I mean, how much does our stuff really weigh? Not a lot, you know? I mean, sure, it's an interesting option, right? And if it's working well for you and you have one, I'm glad that it's working so well for you. In my mind, I can't help but to think there's got to be an easier way. If the appeal of the booth is aesthetics, you could build something like this with something like a Pro Event table and a screen in front of it. And I think about stagecraft class in high school, where you can make a rock out of styrofoam. It looked like a rock. Well, not really, but in the movies they do it, right? Before CGI, they would take things and make them look like other things. Steel beams were often cardboard, but they looked like steel beams because they were painted up with a faux finish and all that stuff. Maybe you could do something like that to make something look a little more kitchen cabinet-y looking around your booth if you wanted to. And if it's a matter of setup, an argument that I heard for these is, yeah, I can get in and out real quick. I can usually set up and break down in about 15, 20 minutes or so by myself, a little less time with some help. Well, that's pretty good. But guess what? I mentioned earlier I have one hand, plus I walk with a limp. The setup that you're looking at right now, including the light show, I can get it in and set up in an ideal situation in about 20 minutes. So there are other ways to do things. Yes, the rolling cabinets are a solution, but there are probably other solutions out there to explore. So, is this a trend? We'll see. We're going to have to wait and see if this sticks around or it goes the way of the dodo bird, like cluster lasers did for most of us. It's a waiting game. And I'm not hating on anybody. Just so you know this, I'm not telling you you're wrong for using any of this stuff. It's just a matter of, as a whole, as a community, is this a trendy thing or is this something that's going to stick around? That's the question. And we have to wait and see with some of this stuff. For me to use anything like the DJ cabinet, there has to be some big changes. Like, it's got to be on some kind of tank tread where it moves itself into the building and I have a little remote control that I somehow operate with one hand to get it to go where I want it to go. It's got to become robotic. And somehow I have to go ahead and get myself a giant van to haul this around in with ramps. And I got to figure out how I'm going to get it downstairs here in my basement studio in my 120-year-old house with narrow stairs. But who knows? Maybe look up the solution for that. In the meantime, I've got something that works for me. And whatever works for you, great. I'm glad it works for you. And you should use whatever works for you. There is also this thing that I think it's human nature. We defend our choices and our purchases. So in the comment section, you may see some people get defensive about some of the things that I've said. And I wasn't trying to offend anybody. I'm sorry if I did. But that was not my intent here, was to hate on anybody. I'm just kind of trying to, I guess, illustrate a point that some things may sound like a good idea at the time, but then down the road, maybe not. I mean, some of us experienced this with Photo Booth, where it didn't work out for us. Others think Photo Booth is the most amazing thing in the world, and they're making a go of it because they live in resort areas. It's different for everybody, right? And I'm willing to learn and listen. So I'm not necessarily stuck in my ways either. I'm always willing to learn. So anyway, that's it. This video was a long one. I apologize for the length. I hope you got something out of it. questions, comments, whatever you got, right down here in the comment section. And whether you agree with me or not on this stuff, remember, we're still friends. One thing's got nothing to do with the other. We'll see you next time. Practice and enjoy.